Hello, everyone. So excited to see people coming in to the event today. We're going to just give a little bit more time while people come on in, but I'll set a few ground rules. So thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. This is week 2 of REI Presents Live. We're going back into the REI Film Library to celebrate incredible stories from our community and dig deeper into them with a specific focus on equity and inclusivity in the outdoors. Big shout outs and thank you to REI. We've had these incredible films that have been made by wonderful filmmaking teams, and now we're going a little deeper. We're going to ask some of the more questions, and we really want to be aware of where everyone is at right now. Every day is hard. Every day feels a little crazy. 2020 is throwing everything at us. And, first of all, be kind to yourself. You're doing great. And, if you're here with us today, we're going to assume you're here because you want to have those hard conversations. You want to be very aware of what's happening in the world. And so we're going to dig into those together. There is a chat, so you can talk to us, the panelists in the chat. You can also add questions in the Q&A that will be below. The chat's not going to be public. So if you do ask questions, etc., we won't refer to you necessarily by your name, but we'll pull your question out of the Q&A. And just a reminder to please be kind, come with grace and openness. Any hate speech or anything like that, you will be kicked out of the event because we don't have time for that. So check on your friends, drink lots of water, and let's do this. My name is Faith Briggs. I am a filmmaker. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm coming today from Pinnacook and Wabanaki Homelands in Massachusetts, where I'm home with my parents. I think without further ado, we should jump into this week's film. So this week's film is Venture Out. It's a beautiful film made by Transwave Films and Spruce Tone Films with the directors Jamie DeNicola, Matt Nicholson, and Palmer Morse. I'm super excited that we're going to have Jamie, one of the subjects, Tyler Lurch, and the founder, who you'll also see in this film, Perry, for a panel afterwards. So we will jump into everything else after there, but thank you for being here. Welcome. I'm going to play the video, and then from there, we'll have a great conversation about it. So thank you.
The outdoor community for a really long time has been a space of, white, privileged men. So I think there's a movement amongst many, many diverse people and groups to say, let's make more visible the fact that we have always been in the outdoors, you just haven't known it. I love the word queer. To me, it is the only word that fits to describe my identity and my experience. My name is Perry Cohen, and I live in Northampton, Massachusetts. I came out as lesbian in college, and then coming out as trans didn't happen until I was 30, I guess to myself, in 37, and to my friends and family, 38, so it took a really long time. The only surgery I'd had before that was my C-section with my kids. They were the impetus for me to kind of dig back in and re-examine who I am and what my gender identity is and how I want to walk through the world as a demonstration to them of what a good person is and does and the kind of person I wanted to model for them. Oh, I love you. Have a great day. So my transition, I feel like, informed the whole second phase of my life. It was incredibly freeing for me, and that was the beginning of the Venture Out project. The Venture Out project is a nonprofit organization, and we lead backpacking and other outdoor adventure trips for members of the queer LGBTQ community. Our first trip filled up like immediately. And then after that first year, people started signing up for multiple trips. And so I asked someone, I was like, don't get me wrong, I am thrilled that you're coming on multiple trips, but you could do this on your own. You have all the skills, you have all the equipment. Why do you keep coming back? And they laughed at me and they said, you're completely missing what you're doing, Perry. This isn't a backpacking organization. You're building community here, and backpacking just happens to be the means by which you're doing that. I think one of the things I like most about Venture Out trips is that participants come from all across the US, all different ways of life, all different experiences.
I've been exploring my identity since I was 14. My name is Tyler, and I use they, them pronouns. In high school, it wasn't safe for me to even look gay. I was like really suicidal for like 3 years and depressed, and I had a severe eating disorder. The Venture Out project was like my first introduction to the queer community and actually being with people that I could relate to and not feel like a weirdo. It totally turned my view of myself around. I found out about it on Tumblr. I saw the post for some free spots on a backpacking trip for queer youth. And I got so excited that I rolled around on the carpet screaming.
Tyler found us on Tumblr, which is amazing because I don't even really know what Tumblr is. Tyler is this go-getter, totally energetic, possibly the most positive person I've ever experienced in my life.
I'm going on my first adult trip in a couple days, and before this I've only gone on youth trips. We're going to the Rocky Mountains in Colorado, and I'm really excited because I think it's going to be a landscape that I've never seen before.
Welcome.
Thank you.
How was your trip?
It was awesome. Down on the trail. But what I'm starting out tomorrow is I'm deciding to wear a pair of shorts just because I know
Everybody coming on the Colorado trip identifies as non-binary and or trans. We found that though we are an all-inclusive LGBTQ organization, people really, really gravitate towards our identity-specific trips. So whether it's a BIPOC trip or a trans trip or a women's trip, those tend to fill up faster than the open trips.
My mom heard about it in like Backpacking magazine. She was just like, hey, you should look at this, and I did, and I'm like, what are your people? Colorado? Yes. So.
This is my like third trip, and I just like love coming here for like the community, and like it's just like awesome to be outside and be like relaxed.
Obviously, on the trail, we don't know everybody, and for safety reasons, a lot of times we decide not to tell them that we're a queer group, just for safety reasons.
We are definitely going to be challenging ourselves, right? Like, we maybe haven't been backpacking before, maybe haven't, I don't know, shared something about ourselves that we might share with this group. There's going to be the opportunity for many, many different types of challenges while we're here. And I would really welcome everyone in the group to try to move forward and try to challenge yourself in some sort of way.
There's about like 3 different aspects, and maybe a couple different levels, because we'll come out and have a report.
Okay, good, perfect. We're gonna have one of the guides in the front and one of the guides in the back, okay? So we're gonna keep a steady, slow pace. If you need a break, let us know.
You're gonna feel it a little bit. We're gonna be going up today, but you guys are all very well and capable of doing this. And you're gonna be really proud of yourself once you get to the top, so.
Yeah, it's really nice to explore.
Just whenever I'm in nature, like, I feel all the pressure just kind of fall away, and I don't have to be someone specific or be anything. I can just exist and not have to think about it. And for me, that's such a release. With the Venture Out project, the experience is being with people like you in your community who you can relate to and that you can find safety with that you may not have at home.
The strength of intergenerational connections on trips is that people get to hear about what life was like for the people who came before them and what life is like for the people that came after them. Just because we're queer or trans or non-binary, our experiences are so vast.
I get such a thrill every time my sister calls me her brother. You know, like, it's still all the time.
I was at work the other day and they were gonna fit like a mask to my face. The person fitting, she goes, "Oh, you have a beard," and I was like, "Oh my god, I have a beard." It was just like, you forget, you know. Yeah, exactly. When I close my eyes in my head, sometimes I still have a ponytail and all that stuff. So yeah. It is cool.
I transitioned 8 years ago. Been on T for over 8 years, and I live as a man in the world now. And what I find is that around the water cooler, I can't talk about what it was like to go to an all-girls Catholic high school or what it was like to be a nun. I've lost 42 years of my life. It's what I wanted. I want to live life as a man, but I realize that there's 42 years of life not as a man that just can't come up in certain conversations. I want to tell a story, and I check it. So here, I can be my full self.
I used to go to softball tournaments recruiting for college in Colorado, in Aurora, and that same tournament's still going on today, and we have softball players coming in. And I get really excited because I've played softball in college and things like that, and I'm taking care of these people, and I know if I say anything to try to relate, I'm just going to out myself. And it's just like, that was a huge part of my life and my identity, and I almost have to stuff that, you know? So I definitely understand what you mean by that.
With T-Bob, it really gives me a sense of self that I don't really have in like the outside world, I guess, where it really helps me bring myself back to really who I am. And it's really what helped me find who I was in the first place.
And I love that you don't have to explain how that, like when I talk about having had babies and carried babies, everyone's like, right. Like, I don't get these looks of like, what the hell are you talking about? Or how does that work or something, you know?
In general, it just takes so much energy to go through life in like this cis world as a trans person, like dealing with those things of like, oh wait, can't say that, or like, I am gonna say this, but then I'm gonna have to explain all of this stuff. I come outside in large part to not have to deal with that.
Mm-hmm. This is the only place that I truly feel like I can be my complete self. In most of the situations, I'm afraid to tell people if I'm trans, and then I wonder how I'll be treated after that, and it just kind of takes away from the whole experience. But knowing that everybody here just accepts for who we are, that's the reason you come back. The communities, the friendships. It's like getting to retreat to your safe space and then finding all your friends there. It just feels awesome.
There's two things we share, right? We share a love of the outdoors and we share being queer, and those are two really powerful things.
Good night, everybody.
Good night. Lisa.
Good morning, everyone. So we are at 4:55 a.m. at Milner Pass, and we're about to climb Mount Ida. It is dark out. The sun should come up shortly. We're gonna do the summit round trip will be about 9.5 miles and 2,600 feet of elevation change. I'm psyched. This is going to be awesome. Sunrise hike.
I learned a lot about myself through T-Bop. It changed my life in every way, where I went from being this kid that just absolutely despised who I was and was trying to change everything about myself, to being someone who just really loves who they are and like really enjoys learning more. Like I love learning more about myself. It just is one of the most positive things in my life. I'm so hopeful for like my generation because I feel like we're so far because of what the generations before us have done, and I'm really, really thankful.
Being a member of a marginalized community, it's really important that we have spaces just to ourselves where we can talk about things that we wouldn't feel safe or comfortable talking about in the presence of others.
Woohoo! We made it!
I think to be able to do it in the outdoors, in a place where we historically have not felt welcome, is a really important means of feeling empowered and reclaiming a space that should be open to everyone, but that we have felt excluded from for a really long time. My hope is that we change the outdoor industry enough to make it more safe and fun and affirming for all kinds of people, but especially trans and queer people.
Hello, everyone. What a wonderful film. I want to invite our panelists to unmute their audio and video so we can introduce them all. Yes, so excited to have you here. Wow, I have seen the film so many times, and every time I just feel like I get to see something different and hear something different. And I think in this current like emotional everyday climate, I was like thankful for this today. Like I kind of just need to watch it every day and feel something good. So you guys are here. I'm so excited to have you. Let's start with having you all introduce yourselves, and then we'll jump into some of the question and conversation. So, oh, and I wanted to ask two things. One, what is one thing you've been excited about recently, or something that's been bringing you joy? Or I like to use Ross Gay's delight. Is there anything that's delighting you these days? And those can be whatever simple thing. And then two, what you love about spending time outside.
Yeah. So hi everybody, my name's Perry Cohen. I use he and him, and I'm the founder and executive director of the Venture Out Project. And I am also in Massachusetts. Faith, I didn't know we were so close. Comtuck land here in Western Mass. And something that is bringing me joy right now, I have 10-year-old twins, and they just started back up in school, and we're just having a blast right now. Like they're at a really fun age, and they're bringing me a lot of joy, and I just smile thinking about them. And the outdoors, especially right now, I feel very lucky that we have clean air out here, or cleanish air, and we can be out there because it's a meditative, healthy, reinvigorating, and rejuvenating place for me. It's just where I go to feel at home.
Hi, I'm Jamie Vinicola. I was one of the directors on the project, and I'm the co-owner of Transwave Films, which we're one of the producers. And I had the opportunity to produce this film with Spruce Tone Films. He, him, his pronouns. And something that's bringing me joy recently is that I've been like renovating my new place, and I found like beautiful wood underneath these linoleum tiles in the stairway, and it's like really good. So yeah. And what I like being outdoors, yeah, I would say this particular trip was very difficult, the one you saw on screen for me. I like doing little day hikes. This was a lot for me, but I had a very good time. I just really enjoy seeing nature, like the calming energy that it brings me.
I'm Tyler. I use they, them pronouns, and I'm on Calusa and Seminole land. And something that's been bringing me a lot of joy, which you wouldn't think would be bringing me joy, is getting my house ready to move, which has been a lot of work. But it's also very exciting to kind of have a new beginning in my future. So it's been really fun. And something I love about being in the outdoors is you're very present and in the moment. And as someone who overthinks everything, it's really, really awesome to just really be there and see everything. And it's so beautiful. So I love it.
Absolutely. I agree with so many of those things. I'm like, sometimes I just want to be outside and it just needs to be cute. It doesn't need to be hard. Okay. I'm not into like the constant struggle fest thing. But sometimes a nice, good, hard thing is wonderful too. Perry, let's start out about with you on the question that I think we were talking earlier this week, and Tyler is like, why do people always ask this question when we talk about it in the film? But it is one of the questions that we're always talking about. And I think we're talking about it in, a queer space. And I think in a lot of different identity groups, we're talking about this question of the need for affinity spaces. The journey in this film we see is all the participants identify as being non-binary or trans. And I think people, you guys talk about why, but oftentimes I think the need for that space is both understood and misunderstood. So I'd love you to kind of talk about, as you create and put together these spaces, why they're needed and what is so misunderstood sometimes about that.
Yeah, I think it is the question that everybody asks. And I think there's kind of an obvious answer is that, well, that's maybe where people feel comfortable and a little bit safer to try new things. And I think it goes deeper than that too. I think, oftentimes we'll say, well, we're going to the outdoors to push ourselves, to learn something new about ourselves. And what I've realized is that's great if you're coming from a baseline of comfort already, where you're ready to be pushed. If you're in the outdoors and you're already feeling targeted or marginalized or like it's not safe already, then saying, I'm going to go hike 15 miles and climb 2,000 feet, you're already at a deficit. And it doesn't feel as empowering. It just feels more frustrating and kind of breaks you down a little bit more versus being in a community where you feel supported, where I think you heard about it in the film. People don't have to explain who they are. It's just one, understood, and B, accepted. One B, affirmed and accepted and understood. Then you kind of have this strength to say, okay, now I feel safe to push myself and I really can try something new or learn something new. And I think that's really important to understand that for many people, even though everyone says, oh, the outdoors is for all, the baseline is not the same for everybody. If you don't see somebody who looks like you or have an instructor on a course who shares some identity pieces with you, it can be really hard to feel safe. And I use this example of when I was in high school, I went on an Outward Bound trip, and I remember feeling like, oh my gosh, I don't think it's going to be safe to come out as gay. And so I was like, don't say that you listen to the Indigo Girls. Don't say that you play softball. And I was like policing myself so much, and these like coded things about what would give me away as queer, that I wasn't free enough to just kind of be in the experience and enjoy it. And I think when you're with people like you don't have to worry so much about that unintentional coming out.
Anybody else want to weigh in on that one? Perry covered it. Yeah.
I don't know, but I want to make space for everyone else. So.
No, I mean, we'll come back around and everything will, I think, yeah. So speaking of being able to be free and be ourselves, Tyler, we got to share you so much in this film, which was such a joy, and so thankful for you it is truly a gift. Can you talk to us a little bit about what your life has been like with this film coming out into the world? Since this film, it can be, you know, everything from being a really powerful feeling to a really scary and vulnerable feeling, to have your life on screen in this way. And I think, you know, with that visibility can come excitement and potentially increased questions of safety, right? It's not always safe to navigate the world in this way. So I'd love to just hear a little bit about your experience and where you are now.
I'm actually, well, thank you so much. You know, oh, sorry. Okay. So, when I was really scared, actually. I was super, super excited when I was asked to be part of the film. Um, and, you know, I was just having so many just like emotions going through me with that. But, um, you know, I was dealing with a lot of shame. I had transferred to a new school, um, you know, my senior year of high school, and I had to go back in the closet about my gender identity, sexuality, and it caused a lot of emotional turmoil for me. And then as I was, you know, finishing up my school year, um, I was kind of left at a space where I didn't really know who I was anymore. Uh, and I felt very lost. And so to come on that trip was an incredibly healing experience. And it was also being part of the film was it gave me the strength, like inspiration to really come out to everyone in my life, because I hadn't been out as non-binary to more than just my friends. And so it was a really, really scary and also exciting experience, I guess, to just know like, okay, I'm ready, I'm gonna do this, and everyone's gonna see it. People I don't know are gonna see it. But it ended up giving me the strength to really. I wanted to medically transition for a long time, but was, you know, scared and unsure how I would deal with other people and how they would see me and everything. But really being out there and showing this film to the world gave me that strength to really take that step and become even more myself. So it was a great experience.
It's huge. I keep not wanting to use the word brave because I feel like that doesn't actually do it. And sometimes it's like people are like, you're so brave. And you're like, that's not really the word. For lack of a better word, I'm just going to be like, it's so brave. It's so wonderful. It's so, I mean, you know, as a filmmaker, it's just like representation matters so much, and having people be able to see you and your experience can give them strength when they don't get to meet people, you know, that are having similar experiences to them. So thank you again for that. And speaking of representation, let's go behind the lens a little bit. Jamie, you were behind the lens on this film, and I was listening to a podcast earlier this week with Sam Feder, who's the director of a documentary called Disclosure that walks through the history of trans representation on screen. And he mentioned the motto basically that is borrowed from a disability community that's like, there can be nothing about us without us. And you know, how does that kind of bring to this world? How does that show up in the projects that you work for, and kind of how you came to this film? I know, as you know, as someone who's a Black woman, I've been on camera before. I'm often trying to navigate all these strange spaces with directors and producers and other people who don't share my identity and don't necessarily understand where I'm coming from. And some of those conversations can be really hard, and you have to like kind of like, what is it? The only way forward is through.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. It's a big question. It's something I think about like constantly. I mean, first off, I would say, like, as you said, like representation is everything. And like, if I had representation when I was younger, if I had the representation that I create now when I was younger, I always think about this, I think my life would have been a lot better. So that's, I think, my motivating force for making a lot of the films that I make, because it's not easy to be a filmmaker. You don't get paid a lot. You're, you know, climbing up mountains for not that much money. Like, it's a whole thing. But I always say, like, if I was younger and I watched what I've created, I think I would have helped myself a lot. So that keeps me going for sure. And I think that in terms of like navigating the awkwardness of creating with people that necessarily don't have your identity. Like, for example, I co-produced this with Spruce Tone Films, which is owned by my friends Palmer and Matt, and they're like two of the coolest guys you can meet. They're white cis guys, and they asked me to be part of this project. And part of me was like, I don't want to feel tokenized. I don't want to feel like I'm coming onto this project solely because I'm trans. Like, I want to be represented, you know, I want to be picked because I'm a good artist, not because I'm a good like trans artist. But I decided to do it because I wanted to create something that would be authentic, and I didn't want something that would be simplistic or kind of like an archetype of what we think a trans narrative is. So it's a constant balancing act for me, deciding if it's okay to feel slightly tokenized in order to produce something that will help people. And it's, you know, a decision I have to make on every project that I'm brought onto. And I'm sure like marginalized artists of every discipline can sort of understand that juggling act that marginalized artists have to deal with. But Matt and Palmer, like, I can't sing their praises enough. And they did everything that you should do as people that come from positions of power when dealing with marginalized artists. Like, they should like write a book on like 101 how to help like other cis filmmakers, because they like empowered me to like start my own production company, which I have now with my other trans filmmaker friend Tony. It's called Transwave Films. They sort of brought all of the resources that I didn't have the access to economically, and they let me like tell the story in the way in which I thought it should be told. So I think that the discussion that was had under the tent that you see in the middle of the film, like, I am really happy with the conversation that happened, and I don't think that would have happened if there was a different film crew behind the film. So that's a lot of things, but I think it kind of answers it broadly, hopefully.
No, totally. I just was like, my heart was singing with that conversation. Yeah, because I completely agree. I mean, it matters that we can relate to the people who are behind the lens as well, and feel like, oh, I can say that. Or, you know, as was discussed in the film, are people going to look at me crazy? And you know, even in an interview about your own life, it's like, you know, just having the space to feel like you can say that. And yeah, the non-extractive relationships. And I think that brings us into a really good question about allyship. I think it's one of the, you know, primary questions that we're going to be asked constantly now. And I think, you know, it's good. It comes out of this place where we're experiencing a time where a lot of people, for the first time in their life, and a lot of white cis people specifically, are for the first time in their life having some really intense and in-depth conversations about questions of race, questions of identity, ability, you know, history. Do these systemic systems of disenfranchisement, do they actually exist, right? And some people are recognizing that for the first time, and other people are really wanting to go deeper, and they're like, how do I be an ally? And don't necessarily know what does that look like. And I think we talked, you know, I don't love the word ally. I use it because it exists in the world. I really love the word co-conspirator, but I'm not, you know, it's like fetch. It's not going to catch on necessarily. I'm okay with that. But, you know, I say that because I want it to be proactive. I want it to be like our identities are tied together. And what does that kind of allyship look like? And yeah, I mean, I could go on and on, but I mean, Jamie, you had some really beautiful thoughts about how do we meet people where they are. And I'd love to hear all of your thoughts about this, because we're not going to have like the one answer, like, okay, guys, take a note. This is how you be a real ally. But we can all kind of talk about what we've seen. I don't know.
Yeah, I can go first and then, you know, piggyback off of whatever I'm about to ramble. But like we were talking about the other day, Faith, like, I feel like, you know, meeting people where they're at in their journey of like social justice evolution, and like, that is important. Like, having REI have like a rainbow flag on their Facebook during Pride Month, like, that might seem like nothing to someone who's at like step 500 of social justice, but to someone who's never met like a trans person before, that can mean everything to them. So I think like not being patronizing and understanding that people are coming from vastly different backgrounds and experiences is really important, and has kind of helped me be patient with people. But yeah, I'm sure Perry has more to add to this as well, for sure.
Yeah, I think this is the other biggest question we get is how can I be a better ally? And I think there are a couple of things. One, I agree. I love the idea of taking action, right, and not just kind of like putting a flag in your window or something. And those, to Jamie's point, those are great things. But I sometimes come back. We run workshops at Venture Out, and I think like it comes back to being a good person and thinking of your philosophy of like, how can I make this person feel safe? How can I help them feel seen? Where am I taking up space that maybe I shouldn't or don't want to? And so, or maybe taking an opportunity where somebody else, I could elevate somebody else. And so I think, one big thing I think about is who are you focusing on and why? And who are you inviting? Who's not there? Like, it's not just looking around and saying, oh, who is here, but it's saying, yeah, and who's not here and how can we invite them in? And also recognizing that people don't owe you their participation. A big thing that happened is on the first hand, it was great. COVID happened and Black Lives Matter happened and all this social justice. And we started getting all these calls and it was like, okay, our business is in the tubes because we can't run trips. But now all of a sudden we're getting all this interest because people want training. And I think what I ask for people is like, this is wonderful and we want to help and recognize we are a small queer nonprofit with not a lot of resources. Be patient with us. We can't solve all your problems and we want to help, but it's not going to happen overnight. And you have to collaborate with us and be a co-conspirator in doing this work. But I think also the biggest thing I think about is never shaming anyone for what they don't know and assuming that if someone's coming to ask me something, it's because they want to learn.
Yeah, I think, it's hard, right? Because I think there's so many, sometimes some of the questions that where people are is hard for me. I'm like, oh, this is your first time thinking about this. Okay, here we are, we're good. And it is a constant reminder. And then also knowing that sometimes people don't have the emotional bandwidth to answer a DM or whatever. And I think sometimes I'm like, in person, one of my kind of rules of thumb, I'm like, would you ask someone else that you didn't know just because they looked a certain way? Like, would you touch someone else or would you ask them this really what is the word, intrusive question otherwise? So think about that. I know sometimes people they get very excited about how to be an ally and sometimes it's it comes on very strong, which is not just because I look like me doesn't mean I'm the one to come up and ask a bunch of questions about these things, unless, for example, I've put myself in a position where I am leading something or I am trained for it or I do feel equipped and I'm saying, yes, I'm open. You can have those conversations with me. I think that is one where, a lot of people are yeah, just trying to be today is what I can do. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think to that point, asking, just a simple, can I ask you about this goes a long way. And that makes you feel like, oh, somebody recognizes that this might be hard for me and I might not have the capacity to talk about it right now.
Totally. In the film, everything looks so beautiful. I was like, where are they? What are they doing? What's going on? Tyler, as one of the participants in TVOP, which I love the name. I hadn't really picked up that was the nickname, which I really like. As one of the participants, what was your favorite part of this week-long hiking excursion?
So my favorite part actually isn't in the video, but it was gorgeous. We got ice cream in a little town after hiking Mount Ida, and then we all took our shirts off and jumped into a really cold lake, and then laid out on the grass while and dried off and listened to music, and it was just so blissful. And for a lot of trans people, swimming can be a very difficult thing just because it requires if you are uncomfortable with your body or uncomfortable about other people kind of seeing it and then possibly being mean or something, it can just be a very anxiety inducing activity. And so it felt really, really safe to kind of go with everyone else in the group, and we just got to swim together, and wasn't a big thing or anything. It just felt like on the topic of how just being on the trips allows you to just exist and just be who you are without having to constantly be focusing on how you're presenting or how you might be being perceived. It was just really, really blissful, and it's not something that I get to experience a lot, just that level of comfort around swimming and just laying out on the grass and everything. So it was a really beautiful moment. And also the ice cream was really good, especially after Mount Ida. So that was a great time. And also there was one more, there was a really, really cool privy that had like a conveyor belt, which I've never seen before. And it had a view of the sky. It was really nice.
Wait,
So that was
privy?
Yeah, like a little outhouse, like kind of.
Oh, okay, that's what I thought, but it has a conveyor belt.
Yeah, it was really surprising. It was like a manual one, so you do a foot pump. It's still very mysterious. I don't know, but it lives in my mind rent free. So always thinking about that privy. But yeah.
It sounds good. Yeah, in my mind, sometimes I want to take photos of like weird outhouses, but then I realize like the view from inside isn't really going to quite show. So maybe a future series. That's a free one, whoever wants to do that. Jamie, I've been wanting to ask you, you are working on, and we do have the TransWave website up that we were going to drop in the chat if someone can do that. We've got amazing folks behind the scenes helping us out with the logistics. But I wanted to ask you, you're working on a doc project called Trans in Trumpland. I know you can't tell us everything. I've been scouring the internet trying to find as much as I can. What can you tell us about this new project?
Yeah, so I can say that we were like picked up to be distributed, but I can't say by whom yet, which is really cool. So that means it's viewable like on streaming platforms in the fall, winterish time. And Trace Lissette is our EP, one of our EPs. Miss Major is another one of our EPs. Chelaman is our third EP. And I'm actually producing this film with the co-founder of TransWave Films, this other wonderful trans filmmaker that I'm like best friends with, Tony Josh Rofferton, and he's directing the series. And it's called Trans in Trumpland. And essentially Tony and I traveled arduously to like red states all throughout the country to meet trans people that are living in like really politically hostile areas of the country. So we went to North Carolina, Mississippi, Idaho, and Texas, and met with folks in all those states. So it's going to be a documentary series, 4 episodes, and I hope y'all will tune in. And if you go on transwavefilms.com, you can see more info. If you go on transintrumpland.com, you can sign up for a little newsletter that we have that'll like, we'll do like an email blast about release date and where you can watch it and all that stuff. So yeah.
That's awesome. I'm definitely signing up. I cannot wait. And congrats on distribution.
Thank you so much.
That is tough.
Thank you.
We have quite a few questions coming from the audience. I know we won't be able to get to all of them, but we're going to try. So one is, do you find that activities such as hiking and climbing has helped with the stress and finding peace with transitioning or with your LGBTQ plus identity? And if so, in what ways? How has that kind of, helped navigate things?
Yeah, I'll start with that one. I mean, that was really what gave me the impetus to found Venture Out. Was one day I was really kind of struggling with my own gender identity and coming out, and wasn't quite sure what to do. And so I did what I always did, which was go for a hike. And I remember I got to the top of the mountain and I kind of looked down and had this, I mean, I still get chills every time I tell this story, but I had this feeling of like, oh my gosh, these hips that are too big and this butt that's too round and this body that's just too curvy, and that I felt alienated for so long. This is what got me to the top of this mountain. And it was this moment of appreciation for my body and thinking, Jenny Brusso from Unlikely Hikers says this all the time, my body got me here. And I really thought about this and was like, wow, I'm so lucky to have this body and the ability to get up here. And wouldn't it be cool if other queer and trans people could have this experience, even if it's for 30 seconds of feeling good in their body. And so I think it is a place where, you know, there's no mirrors. The clothes are not so much anymore, but when I was growing up, it was like a red jacket or a blue jacket. And there was so much less gendered stuff happening out there. You know, there's no bathrooms. There's the facilitrees, as we like to call them, and you can go behind any tree you want. And so I think it's a way of decentering gender that really can help you feel just at peace in your body. And also there's something about the physicality of moving and using your body for good that's really powerful.
Totally. Yeah. I think, I mean, that's one of the things we're seeing in so many different groups is, you know, people saying like, whether it's a BIPOC focused group or a trans and non-binary hiking experience, or like something specifically focused, like Jenny will do something like specifically like Fat Girls hiking, etc., and unlikely hikers, that we just get to appreciate what we're capable of, you know, and like that we could push ourselves through this hard thing or achieve something. And I think also as adults, sometimes we don't get as many of those experiences. Say like, I got to do a thing I was proud of today. And I think spending time outside with our non-human kin allows us to have those experiences more. We have a question about, and I think we kind of talked a little bit about this earlier this week, right? And intersectionality and how we have both learnings and blind spots. You know, I do a lot of work around representation in media, but my lens and focus has been Black women's representation specifically. You know, my identity as a Black woman, as a Black person, and as a woman have come into play in my work. But there's a lot of things that I'm like, oh God, am I going to stumble over those words? Am I going to say something wrong? Is there something I don't know that's going to be really hurtful to someone and I didn't, you know, intend that? But I think as we have more of these conversations, we get better at figuring out how do we support each other? How do we be like truly co-conspirators? And I think, you know, we're seeing things like I've never in my life seen so many like, you know, Black trans lives matters signs, right? And so can we talk just a little bit about the intersectionality in our groups, in our movements, how we navigate those, how maybe have you had learnings that have helped you feel like you could be a better co-conspirator for other identities, and the ways in which you're still trying to bring comfort and into those spaces? It's a big question. Hopefully there are some tendrils to grab onto there.
Yeah, I mean, this is the question that keeps me up at night, because as people can see in this film, we are all white or white passing in this film, and everyone is either identifies as male, transmasculine, or non-binary. And it's interesting, there was a trans woman on this trip, and I don't think it's coincidental that she was the person who didn't feel safe being featured on the film. And so I think there are different, even within marginalized groups, there are different levels of privilege and safety that people feel. And so, you know, on the one hand, I think we are a group who's trying to reach out to a lot of people. And on another hand, I feel like we're failing in a lot of these ways. And, you know, I think the ways we've been successful is when we partner with other organizations. I mean, we've signed the Outdoor Eco Pledge, and we're, you know, taking racial justice trainings and working with people and trying to recruit folks. But we also kind of walk this line of not wanting people to feel tokenized or like we're reaching out to them for very particular reasons. Even though I think, you know, one of the things I'm really conscious of about Venture Out is like, how do we not make this white-led group perpetuate whiteness and kind of the same issues in the outdoors where people may look and say, oh, I'm queer and trans, but I'm BIPOC and I still don't see anyone like me. And so, you know, I think about is, do we invite people in? Do we try to support other queer and trans BIPOC organizations, which we've worked a lot with? There's a group called Wild Diversity we've worked with who's doing incredible things for that community. But I think, you know, what I've come down to is, this is an area where I think I often feel like a beginner still, and I'm trying to be more comfortable in my discomfort and not shy away from the conversations, and you know, think about, okay, how would I want someone to ask me for help, and can I ask for help or ask for participation in the same respectful way of other groups who have identities that I just don't share, and I may not understand how my ask comes across. But this is a hard one, and I wish we're doing better here, and we are really trying to, but it's hard.
I think in your answer, I mean, you pointed to one of the solutions, right? It's collaboration. It's being like, okay, this is what we're doing here. This is what you're doing here. What would us doing something together look like? And having those conversations. And I think asking the question rather than saying, hey, we've got this thing that we're doing. We'd love to plug you in, which is often like, cool, so you want to take me, a square peg, and fit me into this circular hole. Well, that's not going to work for me, and it's not going to work for my people, and it feels like I'm going to send them somewhere where they're going to get microaggressed all day. So we're not going to do that. But yeah, I think those questions of like, who is doing the work in the space that you would like to be doing, and vice versa, and how do we like come together in more collaborations versus trying to reinvent the wheel is one that I think I'm often I don't know, suggesting to people too. And then the other thing I feel like I'm constantly mentioning is what I'm calling the United Colors of Benetton effect, which shout out to them, they have no idea it exists. But just in the sense of like, I remember United Colors of Benetton as a kid because they were the most like tokenized, like take someone from everywhere, throw them in the same sweater looking cute. But I do remember seeing people that look like me. And I think sometimes our first attempts at things are going to be flawed, and we're going to stumble a little bit just like we do on hikes, and we're going to get back up and keep trying. And I think sometimes with like brands, with little organizations, with individuals trying to make a change, sometimes you do have to be a little bit like, let me literally go out and find someone that has this identity and see if they want to be down. And maybe they will be like Jamie, like, all right, you know what, I'm going to do this, knowing that it's also going to be, something that's like self-exploitation for the greater good, question mark. But hopefully we'll, make it so that a few whatevers down the line, it is more normalized and more people can just like do it without having to think quite so much about it.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. It's going to be awkward, and you're going to fumble when you're trying to like be more inclusive, I think. And I'm like sure Matt and Palmer can like probably talk to this more than I can, but the experiences that we had together, I think, speak to this kind of like awkwardness that one feels when you're trying to be more inclusive or empower folks that typically have not been empowered. But I think like those awkward things and those conversations like kind of need to happen to move forward.
Totally. Yeah, agreed. We have a question from the audience about, so there's a point in the film which I think is really, it's important and it's heartbreaking in ways too, where it's the conversation about, we don't necessarily tell people when we're out on the trail that this is a non-binary and trans hiking group, or this is a queer group, for safety purposes. And I think that, I think we've been talking a lot about really joyful stories, and I love what Jamie was saying earlier about, giving a non-typical narrative, right? This isn't like the tragic story that we're so used to seeing about ourselves in, media sometimes, where it's like, okay, we can only exist if we're exploring our tragic identities. But then there are these like painful everyday realities. And the question is kind of like, can you talk a little bit about towing that line of when it's okay to share your identity and when it's better to just like make sure you're being safe? And then have there been times where it's been very clear, even if you're not vocal about it, that seeing you has been powerful for other folks who maybe aren't used to seeing themselves?
Yeah, I guess I'll take this. So it was a really hard decision that we made, of, we want to be proud and we want to be out, and we feel like representation is so important. And this was one of the early on lessons learned, was that not everyone is at the same place, and not everyone is coming from the same background and level of safety. And so what we decided is that usually at the beginning it's a conversation with the group, and we are just very clear that kind of the least comfortable position is the one we will take. So in terms of disclosure, and that people have really appreciated, and it's led to really good conversations about, you know, kind of what it means to be out and why some people are super out and others don't feel safe. And I think some of my favorite conversations have been around this idea of not judging others for, you know, to be stealth means to be trans, but not to be out about it at all. And I think for a while in the trans community, there was some judgment towards that. And we've had really good conversations about, hey, you don't know this person's situation, and there could be real reasons why they are stealth, and it could be about safety or something that you don't understand. And so kind of saying you want other people to check their judgment about you, let's do the same thing within our own community. So that's been just led to great conversations. And yeah, there's certainly groups where we're not super out, but then we'll have somebody come up to us and they'll like tap someone on the shoulder and say, hey, are you a queer hiking group? And, you know, we'll smile and say, yeah. And they light up and they're like, oh my God, I've been following you. I thought you might be you, or I've never heard of you. Can I join? Where's one in my area? And you just watch this like recognition and joy of, I'm not the only one, and I thought I had to hike alone to feel safe, and now just seeing other people like me. And it's a little bit coded, you know. I think to some people we may look very queer, and others they would just have no idea who we are. But unfortunately we've had a few bad experiences where we've learned that we really do have to be careful and sometimes pretty stealth about who we are.
I also just wanted to add, I think it's really interesting that on the youth trips, the kids kind of turn it into a pretend, it's like play almost, where we'll make the jokes about, oh, we're a sports ball team, or, you know, we're a traveling roller derby team. And it's really interesting to me that, you know, they're so used to, you know, kind of putting up that front for safety that it becomes kind of like a part of not really play, but just it's so normalized, but that also that they're able to find joy in it, which I think is really interesting on the youth trips. And it's kind of beautiful maybe that they're able to take something that's kind of sad and turn it into a game kind of. So I just thought that was interesting as well.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I think it's one of those things where it's like, sometimes it's like we have to laugh so we don't cry, and there's so much healing in that laughter, thankfully, and like being able to laugh with other people that get it. And yeah, I love that idea. Sometimes I feel like sometimes people like ask you like, what are you? And you're just like, I'm gonna answer everything but this question, and they're gonna be looking for a specific answer that I know, and they're not gonna get it. And like that just brings me joy, you know, in this way of navigating. We have reached time. I'm so appreciative of all of you. I know we could keep talking for a while. Quick question. So we did add the Trans Wave Films website in the chat. People are also asking, how can we support TVOP? How can we support the work you're doing there? I think we also can put the Venture Out project in the chat. Is there anything else that you, Perry, want to say about how to support that work?
Yeah, so we are a nonprofit 501c3, so all donations are tax deductible. So we always love donations. You can make a direct one. You can support a scholarship for someone. We have a youth scholarship, BIPOC scholarship available, as well as just kind of general. You can buy merch. We have lovely t-shirts, which of course I forgot to wear, and other gear. We got some great clean canteens. Actually, as a result of this film, they were one of the sponsors. So yeah, check us out online, follow us, support us, and tell other people that we exist, because all of our kind of best references to us are word of mouth.
Definitely. And share the film, share some joy. Definitely recommend to folks. Thank you all for your time, for your work, for your energy, for your personal stories. I know it means a lot. And thank you all for being here. Big thank you to REI for hosting us, for supporting the film, and to our friends, Ty, Leslie, and Hannah behind the scenes, making sure that if there are technical difficulties, they get picked up as quickly as possible. So thanks for being here. We've got 3 more films for 3 more weeks, and we're looking forward to digging into a few more conversations with you.